Hello, 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 hello. Back again, back again, back again. This time we're going to be talking about the process of industrialization and how it revolutionizes the world during the modern era. Um, this is the most significant, impactful change that takes place in human life, probably since we first developed agriculture. The Industrial Revolution or the process of industrialization absolutely impacts the lives of everyone it touches, from causing mass migration to mass urbanization to completely changing the economic output of pretty much the lives of every single person that it comes into contact with. Um, Now, one thing to remember about industrialization, though, is it is not a universal phenomenon. It does not strike the world all at once, just like any sort of cultural phenomenon or social phenomenon. It diffuses. Now, industrialization, because of the um, technology and the technical innovation that comes along with it diffuses more rapidly than things that we've seen in the past, such as religion or political revolution or religious movements or intellectual movements. But it diffuses just the same. And just like anything else that diffuses, say religion, for example, everyone who comes into contact with this cultural, social phenomenon known as industrialization experiences it differently. So, in this unit, we're going to take a look at what industrialization is, try to define it in detail. We're going to talk about where it begins. We're going to talk about the massive effects that it has on human life. And then we're going to look at how certain regions and certain parts of the world interact with it and respond to it differently than others and how that's going to shape their future going forward in the rest of this class. Um, so in the supplemental viewing, Crash Course 32 is the one on the Industrial Revolution. It focuses mainly on the beginning of the industrialization in Great Britain, as well as why Great Britain is the starting point for this. It then focuses on its diffusion into Western Europe and to the Americas to a smaller degree. Number 33 is going to be an important one, and it's one that we're actually going to look at in class. This is the one that's going to deal with the development of socialism as a byproduct of industrial capitalism or laissez faire capitalism, as it's called. Um, 207 and 214 are both pretty good ones. They deal with the changing consumption of energy across the course of human history, which is something that, is really pertinent to um, the Industrial Revolution and the process of industrialization. Um, some of the other ones there, the one on the urban slums is a pretty decent episode for you to watch. I'm going to give you a kind of firsthand account of the living and the working conditions that come along with industrialization. I really recommend the one underneath that where it talks about the workers' right revolution. This is going to give you a very good understanding of the political response to industrialization. How after decades of mistreatment at the hands of employers and decades of terrible, horrific living conditions, many members of the working class begin to express themselves through democratic processes by forming political parties, by striking for better working conditions, and it's going to give you, some really good examples of the reforms that take place in industrialized societies to kind of help lift the working class up out of the horrid conditions that they fall in. And then the final one under there, where it talks about the division of labor, that's more of an economics lesson, but it's something that's going to be very it's going to be helpful for you because it'll help you understand what industrial capitalism looks like. And to be honest, it'll be helpful for you going forward in the long run, because let's face it, you guys are going to be out there on your own soon. So economics is something that you really should start getting a good handle on. All right. So first and foremost, we want to define industrialization. What is it? What are the characteristics of it? So at its root form, industrialization is the replacement of human and animal labor with machine labor. Um, Now, throughout history, we as human beings have constantly industrialized. We have constantly created tools and technology to make our labor easier, going as far back as hunter gatherers and stone tools. Um, you know, Even in the classical era, you had simple machines like the lever, you had simple machines like the Archimedean screw that would, again, make labor easier and make it more efficient for us. But this industrialization that takes place in the 18th, 19th, and 20th century is unlike those things, because we are fully replacing ourselves with machine labor. Even the early simple machines required human labor to power them. Now, they shared the workload with us, but they did not take over the workload for us. Um, this form of industrialization enables us to completely step out of the production process. Now, we do have to manage the machines and make sure that the machines keep running apace and make sure that we fuel the machines. But for the first time in history, we reach a point technologically where we can fully replace ourselves in the labor process, right? Now, a lot of things accompany industrialization. In order for industrialization to happen, several things have to happen. Number one is we have to be able to tap into new sources of energy. And the first new source of energy that we tap into is coal. And coal becomes the material that makes the world go round, especially in the 18th and 19th century. As we continue to innovate technologically, we begin to tap into the fuel potential of oil and natural gas. This allows one of the other side effects of industrialization, which is exponential growth in our production capacity. We have the ability to make more things, to make them faster, to make them cheaper, to make them more convenient, to make them easier. And this creates a massive consumer culture. It creates a massive production culture, and it fundamentally changes the way that we live and that we divide up our labor and how we produce and sell our labor in return for these consumer goods. Um, Now, industrialization also means rapid population growth for a couple of reasons. Number one, for a large portion of the population, um, we are no longer beholden to working on the farm and working in agriculture. Technological advances, thanks to steam power and coal power, enable us to create more food more easily with less labor. So, as we know, the formula for this class is more food equals more babies. But we also, thanks to industrialization, over a longer period of time, start to see the human lifespan get longer thanks to industrialization, thanks to the mass production of things like vaccines, thanks to the mass production of things like medicine, thanks to the less intense physical labor that we're doing because we've replaced ourselves with machines. Um, Now, probably the biggest change that accompanies industrialization is the mass migration that takes place because of it. Um, Now, on a local and a national level, this migration takes the form of urbanization, where millions upon millions of people very quickly move out of rural agricultural areas where they no longer are needed because technical innovation has made them obsolete. And they now move into urbanized areas where they can find jobs working in industrial production, mainly factories, but also domestic jobs like chimney sweeping, domestic servitude, nursing, office work, these kinds of things, right? Now, on a larger scale, industrialization also facilitates mass migration internationally as well. Because industrialization diffuses to different areas at different speeds, some regions of the world industrialize more easily and more rapidly than others do. And the population in the less industrialized areas, or in some cases over industrialized areas, migrate in large numbers to areas, to regions of the world where the industrial capacity is not maxed out, and economic opportunity still exists for them. Now, industrialization also carries with it some negative side effects. There is massive impact on the environment in the form of deforestation to provide land for ever expanding cities. There is also large scale air and water pollution. There is massive overconsumption of fuel, especially coal, and in later centuries, crude oil and gasoline. It also causes massive social upheaval. The process of industrialization and the way that it is practiced, at least in the 18th and 19th century, and to be honest, even in the 20th and 21st century, creates pretty widespread economic inequality, which then in turns creates class warfare and tension between the social classes, especially the working class and the middle class, who tend to be the business owners and the large scale capitalists who invest in factories and whatnot. And that class warfare then carries over into politics, and you see large scale political turmoil. You see workers rioting, you see workers striking, you see political parties forming around the working class in order to better engage and better protect their interests and their rights. Um, Now, one of the reasons that this does spill over into the political arena is because there's also large scale human effects, especially on the working class. They are the ones who kind of bear the brunt and the growing pains of this industrialization process. They are the ones who suffer in order to provide the rest of the world with cheap, easy, affordable goods. Um, and the final thing that accompanies industrialization pretty universally is the fact that you have constant technical innovation. Now, in the 18th and 19th century, this means the creation of pretty landmark inventions, things like the steam engine, locomotives, telegraph, telephone, electric generators. And then beyond the electric generator, you have things like the light bulb and, kind of second wave industrial technology, modern appliances, the phonograph, the television, further on down the line, moving pictures, etc. Now, in terms of the beginnings of this industrial revolution, the first widespread industrialization takes place in Great Britain. And one of the big questions that we want to understand and be able to answer is, well, why does it take place in Great Britain first? Because if you look at the history of the human race, if you look at this class up to this point, Great Britain is not what you would consider the ideal or even the odds on favorite to reach full scale industrialization ahead of anyone else. There's many other regions of the world that up to this point in history are more technologically advanced, have better economic production, are more technically innovative. China should come to mind right away. throughout the history of this class up to this point, China has always been, not always, but for the majority of history, the world's largest economy. They've been the most technically innovative with things like the printing press, gunpowder, paper currency, silk, on and on and on. So if in 1750 you had to guess where large scale industrialization was going to strike first, Great Britain would be far, far down the list. So I want to make sure we understand exactly why it is that it happens here. And the reason why is because Great Britain has, kind of the just sheer dumb luck that, well, not sheer dumb luck, because a lot of these things are planned, but it has like the perfect storm, the perfect confluence of things that make large scale industrialization possible. Okay. The first advantage that Great Britain has, it has large supplies of the necessary raw materials that are relatively close to the surface. Specifically, it has large supplies of coal and it has large supplies of iron ore. One of the other things that drives Great Britain to industrialization is its geography. Great Britain is a rather small island with a relatively large and rapidly growing population. And in order to keep up with this population growth, the British kind of lead the forefront, at least in Western Europe, of innovating in agriculture. And they are the first to develop machines that free up agricultural labor that can then move into cities and take up the mantle of manufacturing and industrialization. Another advantage that Great Britain has is it has a rather large collection of colonies and former colonies, like the newly minted United States, that provide easy, cheap, accessible raw materials that can be then manufactured into finished goods. And those same colonies also provide markets for the finished goods coming out of Great Britain. And then finally, one of the cultural factors that contributes to Great Britain being the first, truly industrialized state is that the British embrace the scientific revolution on a very large scale. Now, the scientific revolution, is a phenomenon that takes place all across Western Europe, and the British are far and away not the only ones involved in it. However, the fruits and the benefits of the scientific revolution are more widely accepted in Great Britain. One of the reasons for that is because it's a Protestant country, so there is less pushback from the authority of the Catholic Church. Also, because the English church is a state run church, it tends to bend its will to things that will benefit the state. So rather than scientists being persecuted or being banned like they are in heavily Catholic areas, the Church of England, the Anglican Church, embraces the scientific revolution. So it's much more widely accepted, which leads to a very large, very technically savvy, very inventive middle class. Now, in Great Britain, industrialization shows up for the first time in the textile industry, basically in the process of manufacturing cotton goods. And one of the reasons that this is the first place where it shows up is because Britain has very strong connections trade wise in India. And India at this point in history is the world's largest producer of cotton, even more so than the southern United States. And so, with that steady stream of cheap Indian cotton coming into Great Britain, it needs to be processed, and it needs to be processed faster and faster and faster in order to keep up with demand. And in order to keep up with this demand, in order to process this raw cotton faster, a number of inventions pop up in the textile industry. Things like the power loom, the spinning jenny, the cotton gin, which is actually invented by a Englishman living in the Americas, but it just simply adds to the industrialization of the textile industry. Um, Now, once the process of industrialization begins, it moves and diffuses very quickly into lots of other industries, mainly at first into transportation, specifically railroads, mining, and the ironworking industries. And for the early years of industrialization, it stays focused in those heavy industries because those are the only industries where industrialization is really efficient at this point. Because the early industrial machines are powered by really large, bulky, not very efficient steam engines. And so, in order to efficiently industrialize, those steam engines have to be pushing out large amounts of power. So, it doesn't make sense to industrialize in small scale industries just yet. But as technical innovation happens, the steam engines become more efficient, they become smaller. You're going to see steam power diffuse into other industries as well. Um, Now, along with industrialization, like we said, comes widespread urbanization and what we know as factory life, which is these widespread, horrific living and working conditions in the inner cities in England. There's a widespread economic boom as well as production speeds up and British goods become cheaper and more attractive to foreign markets. Well, that money starts flowing back, into Great Britain, and that money can then be reinvested in further industrialization, which means more products can be made faster and easier, and the cycle continues. Um, so, as production speeds up in Great Britain and these new technical innovations make British goods more attractive and more competitive in worldwide markets, the other nations of Western Europe very quickly catch on to what's going on here. And thanks to railroads, thanks to things like, steamboats, thanks to things like the telegraph, that information, those technical innovations diffuse rather quickly. And within a few decades, the Industrial Revolution has quickly filtered down into Western Europe. And from Western Europe, it filters down into its former colonies, mainly into the United States and somewhat into Latin America as